History is filled with silent streets and empty plazas where life once thrived. We are about to journey across the globe and through time to explore 30 lost cities that were rediscovered by modern science. You will witness how cutting-edge technology and relentless curiosity have pulled entire civilizations back from the brink of oblivion. How does a bustling metropolis simply vanish from memory, and what forgotten truths lie buried under centuries of sand and soil? By the end, you will see human history in an entirely new light, understanding the fragile line between enduring legend and forgotten reality. What do you believe is the most valuable lesson a lost city can teach us? A silent plaza where 1,000 voices once echoed is a powerful kind of ghost. This pull towards empty spaces, towards the quiet left behind by vibrant life, is more than just curiosity. It is a deep, almost universal fascination with the mystery of abandonment and the stories that silence holds. Why do mighty cities, centers of commerce and culture, fade from maps and memory? The reasons are as complex as human civilization itself, often a tangled web of environmental shifts, economic collapse, conflict, and the slow, creeping vine of simply being forgotten. There is an old Latin phrase, sic transit gloria mundi, which means thus passes the glory of the world. It captures that poignant truth: no empire, no matter how brilliant, is permanent. Yet our drive to find these lost glories is stronger than ever. Modern explorers are not just adventurers with shovels. Experts like archaeologist Dr. Sarah Parkak use satellites orbiting high above the Earth, scanning for subtle changes in vegetation or soil that hint at buried walls and roads invisible from the ground. This technology has turned the entire planet into a potential archaeological site, revolutionizing the search. So what causes a city to vanish? Sometimes it is a single, catastrophic event. A volcano's ash can freeze a city in time, as it did at Pompeii, preserving a moment of daily life under a blanket of stone. Other times, it is political upheaval or the turmoil of war that forces a population to flee, leaving their homes to be reclaimed by forest and field. Perhaps most common is a slow, economic death. When a vital trade route shifts or a river changes its course, the lifeblood of a city dries up. People gradually move away in search of opportunity, and within a few generations, the once grand avenues are only remembered in local legend. It makes you wonder, looking at our own sprawling metropolises of glass and steel, what traces would remain if our era passed? What silent plazas of ours might one day beckon a future generation, armed with technology we cannot yet imagine, to ask who we were and why we left? The dense Cambodian jungle in the 1860s was a wall of green, a humid world of tangled roots and whispering leaves. A French naturalist named Henry Mauhot, notebook in hand, pushed through this living barrier, and suddenly the stonework began. It was not a ruin so much as a fusion where nature and architecture had become one. Towering spires, intricately carved with celestial dancers and mythical beasts, seemed to grow directly from the trunks of immense trees. Vines thicker than a man's arm draped over galleries and doorways, their roots slowly, patiently prying apart the very stones they embraced. Mauhot had not found a mere temple. He had stumbled into the heart of Angkor, the monumental capital of an empire that once commanded Southeast Asia. His published accounts, filled with awe, would famously introduce the Western world to the lost city in the jungle. Yet that phrase holds a subtle truth and a significant oversight. Angkor was never truly lost to the Cambodian people, who maintained Angkor Wat as an active Buddhist site. It was, however, lost to the wider understanding of its staggering scale and sophistication. For centuries, the visible temples were thought to be isolated monuments. The truth was far grander. The real rediscovery of Angkor did not happen with a single explorer's machete, but from the sky. In the 20th century, aerial photographs revealed the ghostly outlines of a vast urban sprawl extending far beyond the stone temples. Then came LiDAR, a laser mapping technology fired from aircraft. It pierced the dense forest canopy to map the ground beneath, revealing a breathtaking metropolitan grid of roads, canals, house mounds, and ponds. This was not just a ceremonial center. It was a low-density megacity, perhaps home to 750,000 people at its peak in the 12th century. The genius of Angkor was hydraulic. Its lifeblood was water, meticulously managed through a complex network of canals and enormous reservoirs called barrays. These engineering marvels allowed the Khmer to master the region's extreme monsoon cycles, storing water for the dry season and irrigating vast rice fields to support its population. Angkor Wat itself, originally a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu, is the crowning symbol of this achievement, a microcosm of the Hindu universe rendered in sandstone. Its perfect alignment with the sun, its immense bas-reliefs depicting epic myths, all speak of a civilization at the height of its artistic and spiritual power. So the story of Angkor is really two rediscoveries. The first was the dramatic, romantic revelation of its art and architecture, swallowed by the forest. The second, far more recent, is the scientific unveiling of its true nature as one of the pre-industrial world's most extensive and ingeniously planned cities. It redefines what we mean by lost, showing that sometimes the most profound secrets are not hidden in remote deserts, but lying in plain sight, patiently waiting for us to learn how to see. The same jungle that swallowed Angkor could not be more different from the landscape that hid our next city. Here, the guardian was not tangled green, but barren, sun-scorched stone. For centuries, the local Bedouin tribes in the mountains of southern Jordan knew of a mysterious, fortified gorge they called Wadi Musa. They spoke cautiously of a place of immense cliffs and strange, empty buildings hewn from the living rock. It was a secret they guarded closely until one determined traveler disguised himself. In 1812, a man calling himself Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdallah, a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, convinced his guides he wished to make a sacrifice at the tomb of the prophet Aaron, which he knew lay near the hidden site. Led through a sinuous, shadowy crack in the earth called the Sikh, a corridor of rock so narrow in places the sky becomes a thin, bright ribbon far above, Burckhardt emerged into a sight that stole his breath. Before him, glowing in the afternoon sun, was the magnificent facade of Al-Khosneh, the treasury, its columns and statues carved with impossible precision directly into the rose-red cliff face. Petra, the legendary capital of the Nabatean kingdom, had been reintroduced to the Western world. This was a city engineered for secrecy and spectacle in equal measure. The Nabateans were not just brilliant stonemasons, they were master merchants and hydrological geniuses. From roughly the 4th century before the Common Era to the 1st century of it, Petra sat at the crossroads of the world's most lucrative trade routes. Caravans laden with frankincense and myrrh, silks and spices, would converge here after arduous journeys across the Arabian desert. The city's wealth was not in fertile land, but in its position as a safe, supplied oasis. And that supply was the true miracle. Petra exists in a high desert, receiving sporadic, often violent flash floods. The Nabateans did not see this as a threat, but as a resource. They engineered an unparalleled water management system, carving channels into the cliff sides, constructing dams and cisterns, and laying ceramic pipes. This network captured every precious drop of seasonal rain, directing it to vast underground reservoirs that could sustain the city's population of perhaps 20,000 people through the long, dry years. The architecture tells its own story of a culture at a global crossroads. While carved from distinctly Eastern sandstone, The facades of the tombs and temples display a classical, Hellenistic flair: columns, pediments, and statues that would not look out of place in ancient Greece or Rome. This was a deliberate aesthetic choice, a way for the Nabatean elite to project sophistication and connectivity to the wider Mediterranean world. Their kingdom was a cosmopolitan hub, absorbing and refining influences from all who passed through its gates. Yet this dependence on trade also contained the seeds of Petra's decline. By the time of the Roman annexation in the 1st century, maritime routes were beginning to bypass the overland caravans. Later, a major earthquake in the 3rd century damaged the vital water system. The slow redirection of commerce, combined with this physical blow, gradually turned the bustling metropolis into a quieter, regional center, and eventually a silent necropolis remembered mainly in local lore. Petra's rediscovery reminds us that a city can be hidden in the most open of places. It was not buried under sand or forest, but concealed within the very geology that defined it, its magnificent entrance a natural fortress and a perfect camouflage. It asks us to look at a desert cliff not as a barren wall, but as a potential library, its pages written in wind-worn stone, waiting for a curious mind to learn its language. The rose-red cliffs of Petra give way to a different kind of fortress, one built not within a canyon, but atop a knife-edge ridge in the clouds. Dawn at Machu Picchu begins with a slow, silent unveiling. The first light filters through the mist, revealing terraced stonework clinging to the mountain like a dream refusing to fade. This was the view from the Sun Gate in July of 1911, when a young American explorer named Hiram Bingham III, following the guidance of local Quechua farmers, pushed through the dense undergrowth and found himself among the ghosts of an empire. He was searching for Vilcabamba, the fabled last refuge of the Incas, but what he encountered was something else entirely, a citadel so perfectly preserved it seemed the inhabitants had just stepped away. Machu Picchu was not a lost city in the sense of being forgotten. The families living in the surrounding valleys knew of these ancient stone structures, which they called simply Machu Picchu, Old Peak. Bingham's role was not that of a first witness, but of a global messenger. His expeditions, backed by Yale University and the National Geographic Society, brought the site to international attention, framing it within a romantic narrative of discovery that captured the world's imagination. The truth, as archaeologists now understand, is both more specific and equally fascinating. Built around the middle of the 15th century, Machu Picchu was likely a royal estate for the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, a country retreat and ceremonial center far from the bustle of the capital, Cusco. Its purpose seems woven from many threads: a place of administration, astronomy, agriculture, and spiritual connection to the sacred landscape of the Andes. Every stone here speaks of a profound relationship with the environment. The architecture is a masterpiece of dry stone construction, known as ashlar, where massive blocks are cut with such precision that not even a knife blade can fit between them. This technique, combined with deep foundations and drainage systems, has allowed the structures to withstand centuries of earthquakes and torrential rains. But the genius extends beyond engineering into the celestial. The Intihuatana stone, a carved granite pillar whose name means hitching post of the sun, is a perfect example. During the equinoxes, the sun stands almost directly above the pillar, casting no shadow. Researchers believe it served as an astronomical clock and a ceremonial anchor, symbolically tying the sun to the earth to ensure its return. The entire site is aligned with key solar events, turning the mountain itself into a colossal calendar. The great mystery of Machu Picchu is not who built it, but why it was abandoned less than a century later. There is no evidence of conflict or destruction. The leading theory points to the catastrophic arrival of Old World diseases like smallpox, which swept ahead of the Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century. These illnesses could have devastated the relatively small, specialized population that maintained the estate, leading to a gradual, quiet departure. The jungle then moved in, guarding the site for hundreds of years. Today, Machu Picchu stands as a global icon, a symbol of Inca ingenuity and a bucket list destination for travelers worldwide. This fame, however, creates a modern tension Bingham could never have foreseen. The very foot traffic that seeks to admire the stonework threatens to erode it. The balance between allowing access for education and wonder and preserving the site for future generations is an ongoing, delicate challenge. It transforms the story from one of a lost city found to a found city we must now learn how to keep. What does it mean to rediscover a place only to risk loving it to death? The mists that once hid Machu Picchu now seem to protect it in a different way, reminding us that some wonders require not just discovery but profound and continuous care. The mists of Machu Picchu could not be more different from the ash that fell on an Italian bay one August afternoon. In the year 79, Mount Vesuvius, a mountain long considered dormant, awoke with a violence that defied belief. It was not a simple river of lava, but a cataclysmic, multi-phase eruption that lasted for more than a full day. The final, most deadly phase was a pyroclastic surge, a superheated 100-mile-per-hour wave of gas, ash, and rock that raced down the mountain slopes and across the Bay of Naples. It reached the coastal cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum in minutes, enveloping everything and everyone in a suffocating 600-degree embrace. In that instant, two vibrant Roman towns were not destroyed in the traditional sense, but sealed. Time itself was captured and buried under meters of volcanic material. For nearly 17 centuries they slept, their names fading into local legend until a twist of royal ambition in the 1700s. Workers digging the foundation for a summer palace for the King of Naples struck something strange: ancient, beautifully painted walls. This accidental discovery in 1748, at a site then called Civita, ignited a feverish, if often haphazard, hunt for treasures. It marked the chaotic, glamorous, and deeply flawed birth of modern archaeology. The excavation of Pompeii and Herculaneum became a grand sensation across Europe, a must-see stop on the aristocratic Grand Tour, yet the early work was more like mining for art than a scientific inquiry. The two cities, though victims of the same disaster, were preserved in strikingly different ways. Pompeii was buried under a thick, porous layer of pumice and ash, which collapsed roofs and buried streets but left hollow spaces where organic material decayed. Herculaneum, closer to the volcano, was entombed in a much denser, cement-like pyroclastic flow that hardened into rock, sealing wooden structures, furniture, and even food in an anaerobic tomb. This difference in preservation created two complementary windows into the Roman world. The most poignant insights come from the voids left in Pompeii's ash. In the 1860s, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli had a revelation. He noticed that the hardened ash often contained hollow cavities, the shapes of bodies, furniture, and even fallen fruit. By carefully injecting plaster into these spaces, he could create perfect casts of the forms that had vanished. The results were heartbreakingly intimate. We see not skeletons, but the final postures of individuals in their last moments. A man shielding his face, a family huddled together, a dog contorted in distress. These are not anonymous relics, but frozen echoes of personal experience. Meanwhile, the airtight seal of Herculaneum preserved the textures of daily life with unparalleled clarity. Wooden beds, carbonized loaves of bread still in ovens, and brilliantly colored frescoes on villa walls look as if they were painted yesterday. A library in a luxurious villa yielded hundreds of papyrus scrolls, carbonized but intact, their secrets now being teased out with advanced imaging technology. Together, these sites did more than supply museums with artifacts. They revolutionized our understanding of an entire society. Before Pompeii, knowledge of Roman domestic life came largely from texts written by elites. Here was the full, vibrant picture. Graffiti on walls expressing political opinions and simple greetings, shop counters with stains from served wine, gardens replanted according to pollen samples found in the soil. We see the architecture of the everyday, the bakeries, the laundries, the bustling forums, and the quiet atriums of family homes. This is history written not by emperors, but by the lived moments of ordinary people, preserved in a single, catastrophic breath. From cities hidden by jungle growth and desert stone, we now move to a civilization preserved by the very force that meant to erase it, a reminder that sometimes the most vivid portraits of life are created in the moment of its most sudden silencing. While Pompeii's story was written in a single, violent day, the next lost civilization faded away over centuries, leaving behind a puzzle that reshapes our understanding of the ancient world. In the 1920s, archaeologists working along the banks of the Indus River in what is now Pakistan and India began to uncover something astonishing. Beneath the earth lay the ruins of not one but multiple vast, sophisticated cities, the greatest of which were Mohenjo-Daro, the Mound of the Dead, and Harappa. Dating back to 2,500 years before the Common Era, these were not primitive settlements. They were metropolises of staggering order and foresight, rivaling and in some ways surpassing their famous contemporaries in Egypt and Mesopotamia. This was the rediscovery of the Indus Valley civilization, an entire chapter of human achievement that had been completely erased from historical memory for over 3,000 years. Walking the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, even in ruin, is an exercise in witnessing ancient genius. The city was laid out on a precise grid plan, with broad main streets and narrower lanes dividing uniform blocks of houses. They used standardized, kiln-fired bricks in a consistent ratio, a technological and bureaucratic feat that speaks of a powerful central authority or a deeply ingrained cultural consensus. But perhaps their most remarkable innovation lay beneath the streets, the world's first known sophisticated urban sanitation system. Nearly every house had a bathing area and drains that connected to covered sewers running down the main avenues with regular access points for maintenance. This concern for public health and civic planning was unparalleled in its time. The people of these cities were master craftsmen, producing exquisite pottery, delicate beadwork, and distinctive seals carved with images of animals and a script that remains undeciphered to this day. This script is the civilization's most tantalizing and frustrating secret. Found on thousands of small stone seals, it consists of brief inscriptions of symbols that have stubbornly resisted all attempts at translation. Without a Rosetta Stone, their language, their names, their laws, and their literature are silent. We see a society of immense sophistication, but we cannot hear its stories in its own words. This silence deepens the mystery of their end. Around 1900 before the Common Era, the great cities of the Indus Valley were gradually abandoned. There are no obvious signs of mass conflict, no layers of ash from a great fire. The decline appears to have been a slow unraveling. Expert theories point to environmental causes. Some research suggests that the region's climate became drier, perhaps due to shifts in monsoon patterns, stressing the agricultural base. Other studies indicate that the mighty Indus River, the lifeblood of the civilization, may have changed its course or become prone to catastrophic flooding, disrupting the delicate balance of their urban centers. There is also the possibility of a more complex social or economic transformation, where trade routes shifted and the rigid urban order could no longer be sustained. The rediscovery of the Indus Valley cities forces a profound historical correction. For a long time, the narrative of civilization's dawn was a story dominated by the pyramids of Egypt and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. The unearthing of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa revealed a third, equally advanced pillar of early human urban life, one with a unique vision of order, cleanliness, and community. It reminds us that history is not a single line of progress, but a tapestry of parallel experiments, some of whose threads were cut so cleanly that we forgot they were ever part of the weave. What other foundational stories of humanity might still lie buried, waiting to challenge what we think we know? A businessman's obsession can sometimes rewrite history. In the 1870s, a German entrepreneur named Heinrich Schliemann, having made a fortune in indigo and the California gold rush, decided to pursue a childhood dream. He was convinced that the epic poems of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were not just myths, but records of a real war fought at a real place. Against the advice of most academics, he fixed his sights on a large, unassuming mound in northwestern Turkey known as Hisarlik. With a copy of Homer in one hand and a spade in the other, Schliemann began to dig, launching one of archaeology's most dramatic and controversial rediscoveries. His work would unveil not one lost city, but many, stacked like a layered cake of history. The mound of Hisarlik contained not a single Troy, but at least 9 distinct cities, each built upon the ruins of its predecessor over thousands of years. Schliemann, in his fervor to reach what he believed was the Homeric city of King Priam and the hero Hector, dug straight through the upper, more recent layers with little regard for what they might reveal. His methods were brutally direct, employing dynamite and massive trenches to slice into the heart of the mound. While this approach is rightly criticized today for destroying invaluable context, it did expose the staggering depth of occupation at the site. The great revelation and the source of enduring scandal came in 1873. Schliemann announced he had found Priam's treasure, a spectacular hoard of gold jewelry, diadems, silver vessels, and weaponry. He famously had his wife, Sophia, photographed wearing some of the pieces, creating an iconic image of romantic discovery. The problem was one of context and chronology. The treasure was found in a layer now dated to around 2400 before the Common Era, over 1,000 years older than the accepted time frame for the legendary Trojan War. Furthermore, Schliemann's excavation records were vague and dramatic, leading many modern scholars to suspect the treasure might have been an assemblage of objects from different spots, artfully presented as a single royal cache. Despite the controversy, Schliemann's greatest contribution was undeniable. He proved that Hisarlik was a site of immense, ancient importance, and he forced the academic world to take the historicity of Homer's epics seriously. The scientific archaeology that followed his initial rush, led by figures like Wilhelm Dörpfeld and later Carl Blegen, meticulously sorted the layers. They identified a mighty Bronze Age city in the layer known as Troy 6 or 7, which showed signs of massive walls, grand gates, and evidence of a catastrophic fire around 1200 before the Common Era. This city, a powerful Anatolian kingdom controlling trade through the Dardanelles, fit the profile of a place wealthy enough to be worth a war and strong enough to withstand a long siege. The story of Troy's rediscovery is a powerful lesson in the relationship between poetry and proof. It shows how legend can act as a compass, pointing towards a truth, even if the details are transformed by centuries of storytelling. The real Troy was likely a wealthy, fortified trading hub whose destruction was so significant it echoed down the generations, eventually inspiring the greatest war story of the ancient world. We are left to wonder what other epic tales might be waiting, not as pure fiction, but as poetic echoes of a forgotten reality buried under our feet. The story of Troy was built upon a hill, but some cities found their end in a much deeper embrace. Beneath the clear, sun-dappled waters off the coast of southern Greece, a different kind of ghost town sleeps. Here, the streets are not buried in earth but in sand, and the walls are not hidden by jungle but by gently swaying seagrass. This is Pavlopetri, a name that whispers of a time before the Parthenon, before even the legends of Mycenae. Dating back over 5,000 years to the early Bronze Age, it holds a quiet title, the world's oldest known submerged city. Its rediscovery began not with a dramatic excavation, but with a swim. In 1967, oceanographer Dr. Nicholas Fleming was surveying the coastline when he spotted something unusual through his diving mask. The outlines were unmistakable straight lines forming foundations, the clear geometry of rooms, even the remains of stone tombs, all lying in just a few meters of water. This was not a shipwreck or a scattered collection of artifacts. It was an entire urban plan, perfectly preserved on the seabed. For decades, the full story of Pavlopetri remained a tantalizing sketch. The challenge of underwater archaeology is immense. How do you systematically map a city when your canvas is the shifting seafloor? The breakthrough came with digital technology. In recent years, teams led by the University of Nottingham used a technique called photogrammetry. By taking thousands of overlapping photographs from every angle, they could stitch together a precise, three-dimensional digital model of the entire site. This virtual map allows archaeologists to walk through the sunken city from the comfort of a laboratory, measuring walls, analyzing layouts, and understanding the community's design without ever disturbing a single stone. The city's layout reveals a sophisticated, organized society. There are main thoroughfares, distinct neighborhoods, courtyards, and what appear to be two-story buildings. Artifacts recovered from the site, like pottery and tools, show it was a vibrant hub for maritime trade, connecting the Greek mainland with communities across the Aegean Sea. The most poignant question, of course, is how it came to be here. The leading theory points to the very ground it was built upon. This region of Greece is seismically active. Researchers believe a series of powerful earthquakes occurring over centuries caused the land to gradually sink. Pavlopetri did not vanish in a single cataclysm, but likely experienced a slower, more relentless descent, as the earth beneath it gave way meter by meter until the sea finally claimed its streets. This slow-motion disaster offers a unique archaeological gift. Unlike cities destroyed by war or fire, Pavlopetri was gently sealed by sand and seawater, protecting its structures from later rebuilding or looting. It provides a frozen snapshot of a pre-classical Aegean coastal town, a rare glimpse into the daily rhythms of a people for whom the sea was both highway and, ultimately, their resting place. The silent, aqueous world of Pavlopetri shifts our gaze entirely, reminding us that the map of human history is not just written on continents, but also on the vast, forgotten plains now lying beneath the waves. The sea that holds Pavlopetri is a gentle keeper, but the sands of the Middle East guard their secrets with a dry, timeless patience. In southern Iraq, the landscape is punctuated by strange, artificial hills known as tells. These are not natural formations, but the compressed layers of millennia of human habitation, the accumulated debris of cities built upon cities. One of the greatest of these tells hid the splendor of Ur. For centuries, it was known only as a biblical name, Ur of the Chaldees, the legendary birthplace of the patriarch Abraham. Then, in the 1920s, a British archaeologist named Sir Leonard Woolley began to dig. What he pulled from the dust would do more than confirm a story from scripture. It would unveil the tangible reality of the world's first urban civilization, the Sumerians. Woolley's excavations were monumental in scale and revelation. He uncovered a city that, at its peak around 2100 before the Common Era, was a powerhouse of religion, commerce, and artistry. The most iconic structure to emerge was the Great Ziggurat of Ur. This massive stepped pyramid, dedicated to the moon god Nana, was the spiritual and physical heart of the city. Its baked brick core, originally faced with a gleaming layer of bitumen, would have been visible for miles across the flat Mesopotamian plain, a towering staircase between heaven and earth. It was a declaration in architecture. Here was a society organized enough to marshal thousands of workers for a project that served faith and community pride. But the finds that truly stunned the world came from the city's royal cemetery. Here, Woolley uncovered 16 lavish tombs of kings and queens. The wealth was breathtaking: exquisitely crafted gold helmets, elaborate jewelry of lapis lazuli and carnelian, magnificent lyres adorned with golden bull heads. Yet these treasures were accompanied by a sobering and complex discovery. The tombs contained not only the primary individuals but also the remains of their attendants, who appeared to have accompanied their rulers in a final ceremony. Scholars interpret this as evidence of a deeply held belief in an afterlife where status and service continued, a profound and solemn ritual practice that speaks to the power of religious conviction in this early society. Woolley's careful documentation provided a window into these beliefs, focusing on the cultural meaning behind the finds rather than sensationalizing them. Another masterpiece, the Standard of Ur, offered a narrative in mosaic. This decorated wooden box, inlaid with shell, lapis lazuli, and red limestone, is divided into two panels: war and peace. One side shows chariots and infantry in battle, while the other depicts a grand banquet with musicians and a procession of tribute. It is not a standard in a military sense, but likely a sound box for a musical instrument or a chest for storing valuables. Its true value is as a historical document. It visually catalogues the society's military technology, its social hierarchy, and its economic prosperity, providing a vibrant snapshot of Sumerian life that no clay tablet could fully convey. The rediscovery of Ur was a cornerstone moment for archaeology. Before Woolley's work, the Sumerians were a shadowy people known mainly from later Babylonian and Assyrian texts. Ur provided the physical proof, the architecture, the art, the everyday objects, that this was a distinct, brilliantly innovative culture. They gave humanity some of its most fundamental tools: the first system of writing, cuneiform, the concept of the city-state, advancements in mathematics, law, and astronomy. To walk through the reconstructed ruins of Ur today is to stand in one of the very first rooms of the human experiment in urban living. It forces a humbling realization: the dreams of empire, the rituals of faith, the drive to create beauty and record our stories, these are not modern inventions. They are echoes from a city of sun-baked brick, heard across a gulf of more than 4,000 years, reminding us where so many of our own stories began. A winter sun cast long shadows across the snow-dusted canyons of southwest Colorado in December of 1888. Two ranchers, Richard Wetherill and Charlie Mason, were tracking stray cattle through this rugged landscape when they reached the rim of a deep, icy gorge. Peering over the ledge, they expected to see only rock and juniper. Instead, their gaze fell upon a sight that seemed to defy logic: an entire village of stone and mortar, cradled within a vast, curved alcove in the sheer cliff face across the canyon. Towers rose several stories high, connected by a honeycomb of rooms and plazas, all sheltered under the massive overhang of the rock. They had stumbled upon Cliff Palace, the crown jewel of what we now call Mesa Verde, Spanish for green table. This was not a city lost to a distant, unknown people. It was the ancestral home of the Pueblo peoples, a civilization that had thrived here for centuries before migrating south by the 1300s, leaving behind a breathtaking architectural legacy etched into the stone. The genius of Mesa Verde is one of profound adaptation. Earlier Pueblo communities had lived for generations on the mesa tops, farming the fertile soil. But around the year 1200, a significant shift occurred. For reasons still debated, many began constructing their homes in the sheltered alcoves of the canyon walls below. The result was not a haphazard collection of huts, but meticulously planned, multi-story apartment complexes like Cliff Palace, which contained around 150 rooms and 23 ceremonial spaces called kivas. Building in these cliffs was an act of extraordinary engineering. Stones were shaped and mortared, with wooden beams hauled from the mesa top to support floors and roofs. The alcoves provided natural shelter from sun, snow, and wind, while the southern exposure captured precious winter warmth. These were not isolated dwellings, but parts of a larger community network, with check dams for water collection and terraced gardens on nearby slopes. So why did they leave this architectural marvel? The departure from Mesa Verde around the late 13th century was not a sudden exodus, but a gradual migration over decades. The leading theory points to a perfect storm of environmental and social pressures. Tree ring data reveals a prolonged and severe drought, known as the Great Drought, which gripped the region for nearly 25 years, crippling agriculture. This environmental stress likely intensified social tensions, perhaps over dwindling resources. Furthermore, archaeological evidence suggests an increase in conflict during this period. The migration, then, appears as a strategic consolidation, with Pueblo groups moving south to join existing communities along the Rio Grande and in Arizona, where water was more reliable. The rediscovery of Mesa Verde in the late 19th century ignited both wonder and a grave problem. Before it could be properly protected, the site suffered from widespread looting. Artifacts were removed by the wagon load, and structures were damaged by treasure seekers. This loss sparked one of America's earliest and most important conversations about archaeological preservation, leading directly to the passage of the Antiquities Act of 1906 and the establishment of Mesa Verde National Park. This legislation set a crucial precedent for protecting cultural heritage on public lands. Today, the story of Mesa Verde is understood not as a mystery of a vanished people, but as a chapter in an ongoing history. For modern Pueblo nations, including the Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Pueblos, Mesa Verde is not a lost city. It is a sacred ancestral homeland, a place deeply woven into their oral histories and cultural identity. Their perspectives are essential, transforming the site from a static archaeological museum into a living landscape of memory and continuity. The silent stone towers of Cliff Palace are not a monument to disappearance, but a testament to resilience, adaptation, and the enduring connection between a people and the land they shaped so ingeniously. The defiant columns of Palmyra rise from the Syrian desert like stone sentinels, guarding the memory of a metropolis born from sand and ambition. This was Tadma, the fabled oasis that mastered the space between empires. While its ruins were never truly forgotten by local communities, its grandeur was dramatically reintroduced to the Western imagination in the late 17th century. English merchants traveling from Aleppo brought back tales and sketches of a forest of classical columns standing in utter isolation, sparking a wave of fascination. By the 18th century, European explorers and artists were making pilgrimages to document the site, their engravings transforming Palmyra into a romantic symbol of lost antiquity for audiences back home. This was a city that understood its power lay in connection. From the 1st century before the Common Era through the 3rd century of it, Palmyra grew fabulously wealthy as the indispensable middleman on the Silk Road. Caravans laden with Chinese silks, Indian spices, and Arabian perfumes would converge here, paying tariffs to the city's merchants and guards for safe passage between the two superpowers of the age, the Roman Empire to the west and the Parthian, later Sasanian, Empire to the east. Palmyran society became a unique cultural fusion, a fact etched into its very stones. The grand colonnaded avenue, stretching over a kilometer, is lined with columns bearing brackets that once held statues of wealthy citizens. The Temple of Bel, dedicated to the supreme Palmyran deity, blended classical Greek architectural forms with distinct Mesopotamian and Semitic religious symbols. This was not merely a Roman provincial town, it was a confident, hybrid civilization that carved its own identity from the crossroads of the world. This confidence reached its zenith and sparked its downfall under the rule of a formidable leader. Following the capture of the Roman Emperor Valerian by Persian forces in the 3rd century, Palmyra's ruler Odenathus and later his widow Queen Zenobia stepped into the power vacuum. Zenobia, claiming descent from Cleopatra, embarked on a breathtaking military campaign, expanding Palmyran control from Egypt deep into Anatolia, effectively carving out a breakaway empire from Roman territory. For a few short years, she presented herself as an equal to Rome, minting coins with her image and establishing her court as a center of learning and culture. Her revolt was ultimately crushed by the Emperor Aurelian in 272, leading to the city's sacking and the beginning of its long, slow decline as trade routes shifted. The modern chapter of Palmyra's story is a sobering counterpoint to tales of rediscovery. In the 21st century, the site became a casualty of conflict, suffering deliberate, targeted destruction. This loss was felt globally as a blow to shared human heritage. Yet, in response, modern science has mounted a digital rescue mission. Using thousands of tourist photographs, archival images, and advanced photogrammetry, teams from institutions like the Institute for Digital Archaeology have worked to create precise three-dimensional models of the damaged structures. These digital twins serve a vital purpose. They act as a permanent, immutable record for conservationists, and they can even guide physical reconstruction efforts should the time and resources become available. The narrative of Palmyra thus completes a profound and tragic arc. It moved from being a legend reintroduced to the world to a celebrated archaeological treasure, to a symbol of heritage under threat, and finally, to a test case for how technology can help preserve memory in the face of loss. It stands as a stark reminder that the work of rediscovery is never truly finished, and that the greatest threat to a lost city is not always the passage of time, but the actions of the present. For centuries, the Amazon was painted as a vast, untouched wilderness, a green wall of nature where only small, scattered tribes could survive. This long-held image is now crumbling, replaced by a vision of a profoundly humanized landscape. In the Bolivian Llanos de Mojos, a seasonally flooded savanna on the edge of the rainforest, the clues were always there, etched into the earth itself. From the ground, they look like strange, gentle ridges and canals, but from the sky, the truth becomes breathtakingly clear. Vast geometric patterns emerge, networks of perfectly straight causeways stretching for kilometers, concentric rings of raised earth, and immense platforms arranged with clear intention. These are not natural formations. They are the fingerprints of a lost civilization, a garden city built not from stone, but from soil and water. The scale of these earthworks is staggering, covering an area estimated to be larger than many modern countries. For decades, archaeologists could only guess at their full extent, as much of the region is shrouded in dense forest. The breakthrough came from above, with a technology that acts like X-ray vision for the landscape. LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, is mounted on aircraft and sends millions of laser pulses toward the ground. These pulses penetrate the smallest gaps in the forest canopy, bouncing back to create a precise, three-dimensional map of the ground surface, stripping away the vegetation to reveal the ancient human-made terrain beneath. What these digital maps revealed was nothing short of revolutionary. They showed not just isolated mounds, but entire urban layouts. In recent surveys, researchers identified two major settlements belonging to the Khas-Arab culture, dating from around 500 to 1400 years ago. These were low-density cities sprawling across the landscape and integrated with their environment in a way that defies our traditional ideas of urbanism. At their hearts were monumental ceremonial centers, stepped platforms towering over 20 meters high, crowned with U-shaped structures and conical pyramids. Radiating out from these cores were vast networks of causeways and canals, connecting the civic plazas to residential zones, agricultural areas, and fish farms. This was a society of hydrological engineers. The Llanos de Mojos is a land of extremes, flooded for months each year and parched in the dry season. The Kasarab people did not fight this cycle, they mastered it. Their raised fields, built up above the floodwaters, created rich, well-drained soils for growing crops like maize, squash, and cassava. The surrounding canals and reservoirs managed water, provided fish, and likely facilitated transportation by canoe. This sophisticated land management supported populations much larger than previously thought possible in the Amazonian periphery, likely numbering in the tens of thousands. The discovery of these Amazonian garden cities forces a dramatic rethink. It shows that lost cities are not always made of enduring stone. They can be sculpted from the very earth, their legacy written in the shape of the land itself. The Kasarab culture built a civilization in harmony with a challenging environment, creating a productive, engineered landscape that sustained urban life for centuries. Their story, now being read from laser maps, tells us that the Amazon was never a pristine wilderness. It was, in many places, a carefully managed garden, a testament to human ingenuity that flourished long before European contact. This high-tech revelation opens a new chapter in exploration, proving that some of our greatest historical mysteries are no longer hidden in remote deserts, but lie waiting just beneath the green canopy, visible only when we learn to look with the right kind of light. Granite walls curve against the African sky, a fortress of dry stone masonry built without mortar. For centuries, the ruins known as Great Zimbabwe stood as a silent enigma in the hills of southern Africa, a puzzle that colonial minds refused to solve. When European explorers and settlers encountered these sprawling stone complexes in the late 19th century, the scale and sophistication presented an uncomfortable truth. The dominant, racist narratives of the time could not accept that an indigenous African civilization had created such a monumental capital. So they invented alternative origins, suggesting it was the work of Phoenicians, Arabs, or even the biblical King Solomon. This willful misreading is a stark example of how prejudice can blind us to history. Proper archaeological work in the 20th century, however, would dismantle these myths stone by stone. The evidence was unequivocal. Great Zimbabwe was the heart of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, a powerful Bantu state that flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries. Its builders were the ancestors of the Shona people, master architects and savvy traders who controlled a vast network stretching from the interior to the coast. The city itself is a marvel of adaptation and authority. Built from the abundant local granite, the structures are divided into three main areas. The most iconic is the Great Enclosure, a massive oval wall standing over 30 feet high in places. Inside, a mysterious conical tower, also of solid stone, rises 30 feet tall. Its purpose remains debated: a grain silo, a symbol of royal power, a religious monument, but its presence is undeniably imposing. Nearby, the hill complex, perched on a rocky outcrop, likely served as a royal residence and spiritual center, offering commanding views of the surrounding valley. The scale of construction speaks of a highly organized society capable of mobilizing labor and specializing in crafts, but stone was only part of the story. Great Zimbabwe's true power was economic. The kingdom sat atop and controlled rich gold deposits. Through trade routes that reached the Swahili coast, this gold, along with ivory and copper, flowed out to the wider Indian Ocean world. In return, luxury goods flowed in: Chinese celadon pottery, Persian faience, and glass beads from India and Southeast Asia have all been found within the ruins. This made Great Zimbabwe not an isolated marvel, but a cosmopolitan hub, a critical node in a global medieval economy. The rediscovery and eventual correct attribution of Great Zimbabwe is more than an archaeological correction. It is an act of historical reclamation. By affirming its African origins, researchers restored a vital chapter to the continent's narrative, one that demonstrates complex state formation, international trade, and architectural genius long before European contact. This story is crucial for decolonizing our understanding of the past, setting a precedent that forced a re-evaluation of other sites across Africa, from the stone towns of the Swahili coast to the kingdoms of West Africa. It asks us to consider how many other truths about human achievement have been obscured not by time, but by the biases of those who first told the story. The silent, soaring walls of Great Zimbabwe now stand as a powerful testament to a legacy that was never truly lost, only waiting for the world to look with clear and respectful eyes. The wind that whispers through the Swedish pines today once filled the sails of a different kind of ship. On the island of Björka in Lake Mälaren, now a serene UNESCO site, the air once carried the sounds of 1,000 voices haggling in a dozen languages. This was Björka, the Viking gateway, a town so vital it was meticulously recorded by chroniclers like Rimbert and Adam of Bremen in the 9th and 11th centuries. Yet after its decline around the year 970, its precise location faded into legend, becoming another name in an old text without a place on the map. The search for this physical proof began in earnest in the 19th century, when archaeologist H. Hjalmar Stolp began a systematic, decades-long excavation. He was drawn to the site by the sheer number of ancient beads farmers kept turning up in their fields. What he uncovered was not a seasonal camp, but a planned, fortified urban center, one of Scandinavia's first true towns and a linchpin of the Viking world. Björka was more than a settlement, it was a controlled port of trade, a deliberate economic engine. Its location on an island in a large lake was strategic genius. It provided easy access to the Baltic Sea and beyond, yet was defensible, protected by a ring fort and a garrison. Here, the famed Viking longships were not just raiding vessels, they were the container ships of their age. Merchants from Björka connected the frozen forests of the north to the glittering capitals of the south. Furs, amber, and walrus ivory flowed out, heading down the Russian River routes to the wealth of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, and even as far as the silver markets of the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. In return, silver dirhams, silks, glass, and fine weapons flowed back, turning Björka into a cosmopolitan melting pot where Norse customs met influences from across the known world. The story of Björka's people is written in its grave fields, one of the largest Viking Age burial sites ever found. Over 3,000 graves dot the landscape, and their contents paint a vivid picture of a complex, stratified society. There are the graves of warriors buried with their swords and shields. There are merchants laid to rest with their finely calibrated scales and weights for measuring silver. And there are the craftspeople surrounded by the tools of their trades, blacksmiths with hammers, jewelers with tiny tongs. But one grave, known as BJ 581, challenged centuries of assumption. Discovered in the 1870s and long thought to hold a high-status male warrior due to its full suite of weaponry and 2 horses, modern scientific analysis, including a groundbreaking osteological study in the 21st century, revealed the skeleton was biologically female. This individual, buried with a sword, an axe, spears, arrows, and a board game often associated with military strategy, has ignited profound discussions about the roles of women in Viking society. While interpretations vary, the find provides a tangible, scientific link to the warrior women spoken of in the Norse sagas, suggesting that the social reality of the Viking Age may have been more nuanced than our traditional narratives allow. Björka's rediscovery does more than just mark a dot on a historical map. It transforms the Vikings from a caricature of raiders into a sophisticated network of traders, diplomats, and explorers. The town's carefully planned streets, its diverse grave goods from 4 continents, and its written mentions by distant scholars all point to a society deeply engaged in the global currents of its time. It grounds the epic voyages of the sagas in the practical reality of trade routes and market stalls, showing us that the Viking Age was built as much on commerce and connection as it was on conquest. As the sun sets over the quiet island, it is easy to feel the echo of that bustling port, a reminder that some of history's most dynamic chapters were written not just in grand battles, but in the quiet deals struck between a Norse trader and a merchant from the east, their hands meeting over a pile of silver and fur on a Scandinavian shore. Deep within the oldest stories of Greece lurked a monster, half man and half bull, imprisoned in a maze so complex none could escape. The myth of the Minotaur and the labyrinth was a chilling legend of human sacrifice and royal power passed down for millennia. But was it merely a story? At the dawn of the 20th century, a wealthy British archaeologist named Sir Arthur Evans arrived on the island of Crete, convinced the tale pointed to a historical truth. Beginning in 1900, he began to dig at a large mound called Kefala Hill. What he unearthed was not a monster's den, but a palace of staggering complexity and beauty, Knossos, the legendary heart of the Minoan civilization, Europe's first advanced society. Evans's work would peel back the layers of myth to reveal a reality perhaps even more wondrous. The sprawling palace complex that emerged was a marvel of Bronze Age engineering and art, dating back to around 2000 before the Common Era. With its intricate multi-story layout, hundreds of interconnecting rooms, grand staircases, and sophisticated light wells, it was easy to see how this architectural maze could have inspired the legend of the labyrinth. Evans, however, made a decision that remains controversial to this day. Eager to make the site comprehensible to visitors and to preserve what he saw as its essence, he embarked on extensive reconstructions. Using modern materials like reinforced concrete, he recreated columns, rebuilt walls, and repainted frescoes based on fragmentary evidence. While this gives Knossos a uniquely vivid, almost theatrical presence, it blurred the line between archaeology and imagination, making it difficult for later scholars to separate Minoan work from Evans's interpretation. Yet, even through this filter, the sophistication of Minoan culture shines brilliantly. The palace walls were adorned with vibrant frescoes that pulse with life, slim, graceful figures in procession, leaping acrobats vaulting over bulls in a dangerous ritual sport, and dolphins dancing in azure seas. These images depict a society seemingly at peace, focused on nature, ceremony, and elegance. One of the most debated spaces is the so-called throne room, with its graceful alabaster seat flanked by frescoes of griffins. Was this the seat of a priest-king, a sacred space for religious rites, or both? The Minoans left no clear written history to tell us. They used a script called Linear A, found on clay tablets throughout the palace. Despite decades of study, it remains undeciphered, a silent language that holds the keys to their administration, trade, and perhaps their deepest beliefs. This silence makes the end of their civilization one of history's great puzzles. Around 1450 before the Common Era, the great palaces of Crete, including Knossos, suffered widespread destruction. The leading theory points to a cataclysm far to the north, the colossal volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern Santorini. This event, one of the largest in human history, would have triggered tsunamis that ravaged the Cretan coast and blanketed the island in ash, crippling agriculture and trade. Whether this natural disaster alone caused the collapse, or if it weakened the Minoans just as Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland moved in to fill the power vacuum, is still studied. The result was the fading of a uniquely graceful and artistic culture, its memory surviving only in garbled myth. The rediscovery of Knossos, therefore, performs a double revelation. It gives a magnificent, tangible form to a civilization that existed only in vague legend, revealing a people of remarkable artistic flair and architectural genius. Simultaneously, it serves as a permanent case study in the methods and responsibilities of archaeology itself. Evans's concrete reconstructions stand as a bold, if problematic, testament to one man's desire to bring a lost world back to life, forcing us to ask how we should preserve and present the fragile past. The true labyrinth is not made of stone but of interpretation, where every turn reveals another layer of mystery waiting to be understood. A Spanish priest's report from 1773 reads like a dispatch from a dream. He described stumbling upon stone houses with vaulted roofs and towers, all being swallowed by the great trees of the Chiapas rainforest. This was the European world's first glimpse of Palenque, a Maya city-state whose elegance and artistry would come to define the very image of classic Maya civilization. Unlike the vast, open plazas of other Maya sites, Palenque feels intimate, its white limestone palaces and temples nestled into the misty foothills of the Tumbalar Mountains, as much a part of the landscape as the waterfalls that cascade nearby. For decades after its rediscovery, it remained a beautiful enigma, a silent city of exquisite carvings whose stories were locked away in an unreadable script. The true resurrection of Palenque, the moment it transitioned from a mysterious ruin to a place with a known history, began not with a grand excavation, but with a painstaking, decades-long intellectual puzzle, the decipherment of Maya glyphs. This breakthrough, achieved in the latter half of the 20th century, did something miraculous. It gave voice to the stone, transforming anonymous monuments into records of specific kings, queens, wars, and sacred rituals. We learned that this was not just a city, it was the powerful capital of the Biyakal kingdom, and we came to know its greatest ruler by name, Kayinish Janab Pakal, or Pakal the Great. The physical key to this royal story lay hidden beneath the largest structure on the site, the soaring Temple of the Inscriptions. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruslulia noticed an unusual set of holes in a large stone slab in the temple's floor. His meticulous investigation revealed a hidden staircase, deliberately filled with rubble, descending deep into the heart of the pyramid. After 4 arduous seasons of clearing the passage, Ruz reached a vaulted chamber. There, beneath a magnificently carved stone lid, lay the sarcophagus of Pakal himself, adorned in jade and surrounded by offerings. The discovery was electrifying, the first tomb of a Maya ruler ever found inside a pyramid, confirming that these structures, like the pyramids of Egypt, could serve as monumental royal tombs. The carved lid itself became an icon, depicting Pakal in a moment of rebirth, falling down the world tree into the realm of the gods, a powerful statement of divine kingship and cosmic order. The translated inscriptions from his temple and other buildings at Palenque allowed historians to reconstruct a vivid dynastic saga. We learned of Pakal's 68-year reign, a period of immense artistic flourishing and architectural expansion. We read of his mother, the Lady Sakkayuk, who ruled as regent before his ascension, and of his son, Kayinish Khan Bialam II, who built the stunning group of temples known as the Cross Group to honor his father and the city's patron gods. The texts also speak of relentless conflict with neighboring city-states like Calakmul and Tonana, revealing Palenque not as an isolated sanctuary, but as a political player in a volatile landscape of alliances and warfare. The artistic legacy left behind is breathtaking in its grace and naturalism. The stucco sculptures that adorn Palenque's buildings are considered the finest in the Maya world, depicting rulers with a serene, lifelike humanity. The palace complex, with its unique 4-story tower, likely an astronomical observatory, and its intricate stone reliefs, showcases an architectural sophistication focused on lightness and harmony with its lush surroundings. The story of Palenque's rediscovery is therefore a dual revelation. The first was the 19th century encounter with its physical beauty, a city emerging from the green veil of the jungle. The second, far more profound, was the 20th century decipherment that resurrected its soul. Through epigraphy, the study of inscriptions, the silent stones began to speak, offering a detailed narrative of human ambition, familial duty, political strife, and spiritual belief. It proves that a city is never truly lost if we can learn to read its language, that behind every mysterious facade lies a chronicle waiting for the right key to turn the lock and illuminate the lives of those who built it. The story of Jericho is a powerful echo, a tale of walls that fell at the sound of a trumpet. Yet beneath that biblical narrative lies a far deeper, older truth, written not in scripture but in layers of earth. The site is not a simple ruin, but a massive artificial mound called a tell, a hill built from the accumulated debris of thousands of years of continuous human habitation. To dig into Jericho is to read a physical book of urban history, with each stratum a chapter written by a different generation. The scientific excavation that revealed this staggering antiquity was led in the 1950s by British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon. Her meticulous work, using a method of digging in carefully measured squares to observe the precise sequence of layers, uncovered something that rewrote the timeline of civilization itself. Deep within the tell, she found the remains of a massive stone tower standing over 8 meters tall and a formidable defensive wall. The astonishing fact was their date, around 8,000 years before the Common Era. This was a construction project from the Neolithic period, a time when humans were just beginning to transition from nomadic hunting to settled farming. This discovery positioned Jericho not just as an ancient city, but as a strong contender for the very first city in the world, a proto-urban community that gathered for protection and shared endeavor long before the pyramids of Egypt were even a concept. This Neolithic settlement, with its spring providing precious water, represents a foundational moment in the human story, the deliberate choice to build something permanent, to invest in a collective future behind a wall of stone. The biblical story of Joshua and the falling walls belongs to a much later chapter, set in the Bronze Age over 7,000 years after that first tower was built. The archaeological record shows that Jericho was indeed destroyed and rebuilt numerous times across the millennia, a testament to its strategic location and enduring importance. Evidence of collapsed walls and fierce fires from different eras aligns with the cyclical nature of life in this contested region, though linking any single destruction layer definitively to the events described in the Book of Joshua remains a complex matter of interpretation. What the science provides is context. It shows a place so valuable, so central to the life of the region, that communities return to it again and again, each building upon the legacy of the last. The story of Jericho's rediscovery, therefore, is one of separating powerful legend from profound, layered history. It does not disprove the biblical account but plants it in the rich soil of a very real, ancient urban experience. The tell of Jericho teaches us that some places are so deeply woven into the human journey that they become palimpsests, where one great story is literally built upon the foundations of another, older, and equally revolutionary tale. It asks us to listen not just for the sound of trumpets, but for the quiet, persistent work of the first farmers who decided to build a tower, look out over the Jordan Valley, and call it home. The silent sentinels of Easter Island have long told a story of ruin. For generations, the narrative was stark and cautionary. A remote Polynesian society, obsessed with carving and erecting the massive stone moai, collapsed after recklessly stripping their island of trees, leading to starvation, warfare, and societal collapse. This was the tale of ecocide, a civilization that engineered its own doom. But modern science, armed with new ways of seeing, is rewriting this script. The real rediscovery on Rapa Nui is not of the statues themselves, they were never lost, but of the complex, sustainable world that built them. Recent island-wide surveys using ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR, and soil chemistry analysis have peeled back the grassy surface to reveal a hidden landscape of astonishing organization. The map that emerges is not of a desperate, dying people, but of a resilient society that thrived here for centuries. Researchers have meticulously charted thousands of previously unseen features: the subtle outlines of house foundations, intricate systems of rock gardens used to grow sweet potatoes and taro, and even the remains of fortified chicken coops. These are not the marks of a society in its death throes, but of a people deeply attuned to their environment, actively engineering it for long-term survival on a fragile, isolated island. The soil itself tells a story of careful management, showing evidence of composting and mulching practices that enrich the earth. This evidence directly challenges the old narrative of a sudden, self-inflicted ecological disaster. So how did a society of perhaps just a few thousand people accomplish the staggering feat of the Moe? The answer lies in the very social cohesion the ecocide story claimed they lost. Carving a single multi-ton statue from the volcanic rock of the Rano-Raraku quarry was a monumental act of engineering, but transporting it up to 18 kilometers across the island and erecting it on a ceremonial platform required something even more powerful: sophisticated social organization. This was not the frantic act of a collapsing culture, but a sustained, generations-long project of spiritual and political expression. The prevailing theory suggests a form of cooperative competition, where different kin groups or mata invested their energy and pride into creating these ancestral figures. The process would have required food surpluses to support specialist carvers and movers, skilled rope makers, and ritual leaders, all indicators of a stable, functioning society. The true turning point in Rapa Nui's history likely came not from internal failure, but from external contact. The arrival of European explorers in the 18th century brought with it diseases for which the islanders had no immunity, and later, slave raids that decimated the population. These traumatic events, combined with the introduction of invasive species like rats, disrupted the delicate socio-ecological balance that had sustained the Rapa Nui for so long. The statues did not cause the collapse. They stand as enduring monuments to the complex society that was unraveled by forces from beyond its shores. This new understanding transforms Easter Island from a simplistic parable of environmental hubris into a profound lesson in resilience and cultural ingenuity. The rediscovery here is of an entire island as a managed landscape, a lost city not of stone walls but of human intention woven into the very soil. It asks us to look past the iconic, solitary heads and see the vibrant, interconnected community that raised them, a society that mastered its world for centuries before the outside world arrived to irrevocably change it. The resilience of Rapa Nui was born from isolation, but some of history's most fascinating experiments in culture arose from deliberate, distant connection. On the remote plains where the Kokcha River meets the Amu Darya in northern Afghanistan, a different kind of city once stood. Here, in the 1960s, French archaeologists led by Paul Bernard made a discovery that felt like stepping through a portal. They unearthed the ruins of Ai-Khanoum, a meticulously planned Greek metropolis founded in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquests in the 4th century before the Common Era. This was not a minor trading post, it was a full-scale Hellenistic capital, a startling time capsule of Greek life planted over 3,000 miles from Athens, on the very edge of the known ancient world. Walking its grid-patterned streets, one could have seen a grand theater carved into a hillside, a massive gymnasium for athletic and intellectual training, and a palace complex with columned courtyards. The most telling structure was a temple that stood not on a stepped base like a Greek temple, but on a 3-stepped Persian-style platform, its architecture a silent dialogue between two worlds. Ai-Khanoum was a deliberate project in cultural fusion, a place where Greek settlers, local Bactrians, and Persian influences met and mingled. The city was equipped with all the institutions necessary to cultivate Greek identity. The gymnasium was the heart of civic life, where young men were educated in literature, philosophy, and sport. Yet the artifacts found within its walls tell a story of synthesis. A finely crafted plate might depict the Greek goddess Cybele in a chariot, but driven in the distinctly Central Asian style. Administrative records were kept in Greek, but the economic life they documented was deeply rooted in the local agriculture and trade of the region. One of the most poignant finds was a stone slab bearing a philosophical inscription. It contained maxims from the oracle at Delphi, such as "Know thyself" and "Nothing in excess," copied by a traveler named Clearchus, who had journeyed all the way from the Mediterranean to have them engraved in this distant colony. It was an attempt to transplant the moral core of Greek civilization to the banks of an Afghan river. This grand experiment ended not with a slow decline, but with sudden violence around 145 before the Common Era. The city shows clear signs of a brutal attack. Treasure hoards hastily buried, unmarked graves containing multiple individuals, and evidence of widespread fire. While the exact attackers remain debated, the event underscores the fragility of such cosmopolitan hubs in a volatile region. Ai-Khanoum's rediscovery forces us to expand the map of classical antiquity. It proves that the Hellenistic world was not confined to the coasts of the Mediterranean, but reached deep into Central Asia, creating vibrant hybrid cities that stood for centuries. Its silent ruins are a powerful testament to human ambition's reach and a sobering reminder of how quickly a beacon of cross-cultural exchange can be extinguished, its light preserved only in the fragments left for archaeologists to piece together centuries later. A city built on water requires a foundation of pure will. Rising from the shallow lagoon on the eastern shore of Pompeii Island is a sight that defies simple explanation: Nan Madol. This is not a city of stone blocks, but of colossal logs, millions of basalt crystals, some weighing up to 50 tons, stacked like timber to create over 100 artificial islets atop a living coral reef. Encircled by mangrove forests and tidal channels, this maze of canals and crumbling walls feels less discovered than revealed by the shifting light, a swamp sanctuary of profound and lingering mystery. European explorers first documented the site in the 19th century, with their accounts echoing a mix of awe and utter bewilderment. How could a society without metal tools, pulleys, or draft animals have moved these titanic stones, some quarried from the opposite side of the island, and then built a city upon the sea itself? The local oral tradition speaks of magic, of legendary brothers who used a flying dragon to transport the stones. Modern archaeology suggests a feat of coordinated community effort, likely involving bamboo rafts, ropes, and an immense investment of social organization over generations. The builders were the Allure dynasty, who unified Pompeii under their rule for centuries. Nan Madol, whose name means the spaces between, referring to its network of canals, was their ceremonial and political heart. Its islets served distinct purposes. Some held special dwellings for priests and nobility, their walls offering privacy and prestige. Others were reserved for specific rituals, like the preparation of sacred feasts or the creation of ceremonial oils. One of the most significant islets is Nan Dawar's, which features massive 25-foot-high walls enclosing a royal tomb complex. The entire layout creates a clear separation between the sacred elite and the common populace who lived on the main island, a physical manifestation of power built directly into the landscape. The purpose of this colossal undertaking seems woven from both practical and spiritual threads. As an administrative center, it centralized control. As a ritual space, it connected the rulers to the gods and ancestors, with the ever-present water acting as both a defensive moat and a symbolic boundary between the mundane and the divine. Yet the site's atmosphere, even today, is one of heavy silence and dense, humid air. Local legends speak of Nan Madol as a place of potent, sometimes forbidding, spiritual energy, adding a layer of cultural reverence and caution to its physical enigma. The true rediscovery of Nan Madol is ongoing. Its construction techniques are still not fully understood, and its mangrove-choked setting makes excavation extraordinarily difficult. It stands not as a ruin easily decoded, but as a monument to a specific and powerful vision of order, a society that chose not to conquer a mountain or a plain, but to literally create its own ground, stone by backbreaking stone, in the liminal space between the solid earth and the open ocean. What does it mean to build a capital not on the strongest land, but in the most challenging interface between elements? The answer lies in the silent, seaweed-draped canals, a testament to a civilization that drew its authority from its ability to defy the very environment that surrounded it. The will to build upon the sea is matched only by the ambition to raise monuments from a desert valley. For decades, the story of civilization's dawn in the Americas was thought to begin with the Olmecs of Mexico around 1200 years before the Common Era. That timeline was shattered in the 1990s when a team of Peruvian archaeologists, led by Ruth Shady, began meticulous work in the Supe Valley north of Lima. What they uncovered was a sprawling complex of pyramids, plazas, and residential mounds, carbon dated to an astonishing 2,600 years before the Common Era. This was Carroll, a contemporary of the Great Pyramids of Egypt, thriving in complete isolation across the Atlantic. Its discovery did not just add an older chapter to American history, it demanded we rewrite the entire book, revealing a cradle of civilization that arose independently in the arid river valleys of Peru. Carroll is a city of quiet, monumental presence. Its central feature is the Great Pyramid, a terraced structure rising nearly 100 feet high, built from stone-filled reed bags and faced with stone and plaster. Surrounding it are other major pyramidal structures, residential quarters for different social classes, and a series of striking sunken circular plazas. These plazas, with their carefully engineered staircases leading down into ceremonial space, suggest gatherings of deep ritual significance. The architecture speaks of a society capable of mobilizing a large, coordinated labor force for communal projects that served both practical and spiritual needs. Yet the most revolutionary aspect of Carroll lies not in what it has, but in what it lacks. After decades of excavation, researchers have found no fortifications, no weapons, and no evidence of warfare or organized violence. This is a society that for centuries seems to have flourished without conflict. Instead of warfare, Carroll's power was built on trade and intellectual exchange. The city was a nexus in a vast network that connected the coastal communities with the highlands and the Amazonian interior. Archaeologists have found remains of anchovies and shellfish from the Pacific coast, alongside fruits and vegetables from the jungle, and cotton grown in the valley itself. This cotton was key. It was used to make the fishing nets for the coastal communities, creating a symbiotic economic relationship where the inland city provided the technology for the coast to harvest the sea, and the coast provided the sustenance. But Carroll's influence went beyond goods. Discoveries include a collection of musical instruments, flutes made from pelican and condor bones, and cornets of deer and llama bones, decorated with intricate carvings of monkeys, birds, and mythological figures. This suggests a trade in ideas, rituals, and perhaps even a shared cosmology that bound this early network together through culture, not coercion. The society was pre-ceramic, meaning they did not use pottery, yet they achieved remarkable sophistication. They used a system of knotted strings, a precursor to the Inca quipu, for record-keeping. Their understanding of astronomy is encoded in the alignment of their structures with celestial bodies. They built sophisticated irrigation canals to channel river water to their fields, mastering their challenging environment through collective effort and ingenuity. Carroll presents a profound alternative model for the rise of social complexity. For a long time, the dominant theory held that cities and states emerged primarily through the pressures of warfare and domination. Cradle stands as a powerful, silent counterargument. It suggests that civilization can also coalesce around shared economic interests, ritual life, and a collective investment in monumental projects that celebrate community and cosmic order. This rediscovery does not just push back a clock, it expands our imagination of what is possible in the human story, offering a glimpse of a peaceful, prosperous beginning in the shadows of the Andes, a testament to the fact that our first steps toward urban life did not have to be taken on a path of conflict. A fortress can be a city unto itself, a world of stone built for a singular purpose. Perched on a lonely hill in western Syria, the Crac des Chevaliers is not a ruin so much as a frozen moment of medieval might. Its concentric walls, towering over the surrounding plains, form one of the best preserved and most awe-inspiring castles from the era of the Crusades. While its physical presence was never forgotten, its modern rediscovery came not from excavation, but from a profound re-evaluation of its place in history, transforming it from a local landmark into a global textbook on stone, strategy, and a fraught period of cultural encounter. The story of this fortress city begins with its builders, the Knights Hospitaller, a military and religious order. They took an existing Kurdish fortification and, over decades in the 12th and 13th centuries, transformed it into an almost unconquerable stronghold. The design is a masterpiece of defensive thinking. Two massive, concentric curtain walls create a deadly killing ground between them. The inner wall, studded with massive round towers, is so thick that entire rooms are carved within its stone. The castle could garrison a garrison of up to 2,000 men and store supplies to withstand a siege lasting years. It was less a building and more a self-contained ecosystem of power, with storerooms, chapels, a great hall, and even a covered aqueduct ensuring a fresh water supply. Its strategic purpose was clear: to control the Homs Gap, a vital pass between the Mediterranean coast and the interior of Syria, securing the rear of the Crusader states and projecting Frankish authority deep into Muslim territory. For over a century, the Crac stood as an immovable symbol of Crusader permanence. Its fall, however, reveals the shifting tides of history. In 1271, the mighty Mamluk Sultan Baybars, a brilliant military leader, laid siege to the castle. Rather than a direct, costly assault, he is said to have used a clever ruse. A forged letter, purportedly from the Crusader Count of Tripoli ordering the garrison to surrender, was delivered to the knights. Isolated and believing their situation hopeless, they complied. The castle's capture marked not its destruction, but its absorption into a new empire. The Mamluks repaired and reinforced it, adding a mosque and leaving inscriptions celebrating their victory, creating a palimpsest of conflict and continuity in the stone. The modern appreciation of Crac des Chevaliers as a historical monument beyond a mere scenic ruin began with detailed architectural study. Scholars like T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, wrote passionately about its majesty in the early 20th century. This careful analysis revealed it as a pinnacle of medieval military engineering, but also as a site of unexpected cultural exchange. While built for war, its architecture shows influences from both European and Byzantine traditions, and its later Mamluk additions speak to a practical reuse that transcends the conflict of its origins. Its rediscovery, therefore, is intellectual. It forces us to look past the simple narratives of holy war and see the complex reality on the ground, a place where two worlds collided, borrowed, and built, leaving behind a fortress that tells a story not just of conquest, but of adaptation and the enduring language of stone. What does it mean when a monument to division becomes, centuries later, a shared lesson in human ingenuity? The silent halls of the Crac hold that paradox, a city built for war that now teaches us about the intricate, often surprising, connections that shape our world. Deep within the Austrian Alps, the mountain itself holds its breath. In the darkness of the Hallstatt salt mines, time did not pass, it was pickled. Here, miners from the early Iron Age, members of the culture that now bears this valley's name, did not just extract a precious mineral, they inadvertently created one of archaeology's most perfect time capsules. The Hallstatt culture, flourishing from around 800 to 500 years before the Common Era, gives its name to the very period that marks the dawn of true European history. But our understanding of these people comes not from grand palaces, but from the silent, salty depths where they worked. The mine's environment is a preservative miracle. Salt draws moisture from the air, creating an anaerobic setting where bacteria that cause decay cannot survive. In this sterile darkness, organic materials that would vanish in days anywhere else have endured for millennia. The discoveries are breathtaking in their intimacy. Leather backpacks, fur caps, and woolen clothing lie as if discarded yesterday. Wooden tools, ladders, and even the miners' own snack remnants, pieces of cheese and dried fruit, have been found. Most remarkably, the bodies of the miners themselves have been preserved, their skin and clothing tanned by the salt, offering a direct, poignant connection to individuals who labored here over 2,500 years ago. These are not ceremonial burials, but accidental resting places, offering an unvarnished glimpse into the physical reality of their lives and the dangers of their work. This was far more than a remote industrial outpost. Hallstatt was a thriving economic powerhouse, a city organized entirely around the white gold of salt. The community lived on a narrow strip of land between the towering Dachstein Mountains and the deep waters of the Hallstatter Sea. Their wealth, gleaned from trading salt across Europe, is evident in the nearby cemetery, where over 1,000 graves have been excavated. The grave goods tell a story of a stratified society with access to luxuries from the Mediterranean world, including fine Greek pottery and ornate bronze vessels from Italy. The salt miners, therefore, were part of a sophisticated network. They produced the commodity that funded an elite class, connected this alpine valley to continental trade routes, and fostered artistic innovation in metalwork. The rediscovery of Hallstatt forces us to expand our definition of a significant city. It was not a political capital with monuments to gods or kings. Its power was economic, its architecture functional, and its legacy written in leather, wood, and salt-cured skin. This preservation offers a different kind of truth. While the stones of palaces tell us what leaders wanted to project, the contents of a miner's lunchbox and the worn soles of his shoes tell us how he lived, what he ate, and the texture of his daily toil. In the absolute dark of the salt mine, we find a brilliantly illuminated portrait of ordinary life, a reminder that history is not only made in throne rooms and temples, but in the quiet, strenuous work that fuels a civilization. Granite boulders the size of houses lie scattered across the landscape as if tossed by a giant. Among them, rising from the banks of the Tungabhadra River, stand the silent, soaring towers of countless temples. This is Hampi, the breathtaking skeleton of Vijayanagara, a name that means city of victory. For over 2 centuries, from 1336 to 1565, this was the resplendent capital of the last great Hindu empire to rule South India, a metropolis so wealthy that Portuguese and Persian travelers described it as rivaling Rome. Its rediscovery began not with a single dramatic find, but with a slow, astonished documentation. After the empire's catastrophic military defeat in 1565, the city was sacked and gradually abandoned. Over time, local communities never forgot the sacred site, but the world at large lost sight of its staggering scale. British colonial surveyors in the 19th century began to systematically map the ruins, their sketches and reports reintroducing the scholarly world to a lost capital of epic proportions. Yet it is only through modern archaeology that we have come to grasp the true genius of its urban design. a city engineered in profound harmony with a dramatic, riverine landscape. The builders of Vijayanagara did not clear the land, they composed with it. They used the massive natural boulders as foundations, fortifications, and even as canvases for intricate carvings. The city's layout was a masterclass in practical innovation, centered around a revolutionary water management system. In a region of seasonal rainfall, they constructed an intricate network of canals, aqueducts, and massive stone-lined tanks to harvest and store every precious drop from the river and monsoon rains. These reservoirs, some large enough to be mistaken for natural lakes, ensured a reliable water supply for the city's estimated 500,000 residents and for irrigating the surrounding agricultural belt. This hydraulic engineering was the lifeblood of the empire, turning a rugged landscape into a fertile and defensible stronghold. Commerce flowed as steadily as the water. The city's international bazaars, described in vivid detail by foreign visitors, were hubs of global exchange. Long, pillared market streets, still visible today, once thronged with traders selling diamonds, spices, fine cotton textiles, and horses imported from Arabia. The empire's prosperity was built on this control of trade routes, and the city reflected its cosmopolitan character. But the soul of Vijayanagara was expressed in stone and devotion. The temple architecture here is explosively vibrant, a distinct style marked by monumental gateway towers adorned with intricate, cascading sculptures of gods, goddesses, and mythological scenes. The Vithala temple, with its iconic stone chariot and musical pillars that sing when tapped, stands as a pinnacle of this artistic fervor. These were not just places of worship, they were centers of learning, music, and dance, the beating cultural heart of the empire. The story of Vijayanagara's end is one of sudden fracture. In 1565, a coalition of rival sultanates defeated the imperial army at the Battle of Talikota. The victorious forces then marched on the capital, methodically looting and destroying its grand structures over several months. While the empire persisted in a reduced form for a time, the city itself was never rebuilt. The ruins were reclaimed by the land, with banyan trees slowly weaving their roots through the stonework. Today, the rediscovery of Vijayanagara serves a dual purpose. For historians, it provides an unparalleled record of a sophisticated, innovative, and powerful early modern state. For millions of visitors, it is a living pilgrimage site, where the spiritual energy of the temples continues amidst the haunting beauty of the ruins. The city's silence now speaks of both monumental achievement and the fragile nature of power, its story carved into every weathered boulder and every silent, sculpted tower reaching for the sky. A hidden city does not always lie in a distant jungle or beneath desert sands. Sometimes it waits directly under your feet, in the fantastical landscape of Cappadocia, Turkey, where wind-carved stone pillars known as fairy chimneys dot the horizon. The true marvel is not what rises from the earth, but what descends into it. Here in 1963, a man renovating his home in the town of Derinku swung a hammer and broke through a basement wall, only to watch the stones tumble away into a void. Clearing the rubble, he found not a small cellar, but the entrance to a tunnel, cool air whispering from the darkness. This accidental discovery would lead to the exploration of an entire underground metropolis, a labyrinthine refuge carved from the soft, workable volcanic rock called tuff. Derinku is a city in reverse, a place where safety was found not by building up, but by digging down. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Explorers have mapped at least 18 levels descending over 200 feet into the earth, with space to have sheltered an estimated 20,000 people along with their livestock and supplies. This was not a simple cave system or a cluster of hiding places. It was a fully engineered subterranean world, a testament to communal planning and survivalist ingenuity built over centuries, likely from the Byzantine era onward. To sustain life so far from the sun required brilliant foresight. The architects of Derinkuyu solved the most critical problems of underground living with elegant solutions. Dozens of narrow ventilation shafts, some stretching over 170 feet to the surface, provided a constant, fresh airflow to the deepest chambers. These same shafts doubled as wells, tapping into the underground water table to provide a vital, secure supply. Massive, circular stone doors weighing up to 1,000 pounds could be rolled across key passageways from the inside, sealing off entire sections in case of intrusion. The city contained everything a community needed for extended confinement: stables for animals, storage rooms for grain and oil, wine and oil presses, kitchens, communal rooms, and even dedicated spaces for worship, including a simple, barrel-vaulted church. The social organization needed to inhabit such a space is as impressive as the engineering. Life here would have been one of tightly coordinated routine and shared responsibility. Managing food, water, waste, and security in the confined, lantern-lit gloom required clear rules and cooperation. Historians believe Derinkuyu and the many other smaller underground cities in the region were used primarily as places of refuge during periods of intense conflict and invasion, from Arab raids to later Mongol incursions. When danger appeared on the horizon, entire regional populations could vanish beneath the ground, sometimes for months at a time, emerging only when the threat had passed. This vertical shift in perspective is profound. For generations, we have scanned horizons and plains for lost cities. Derinkuyu reminds us to look down, to consider the earth not just as a foundation, but as a sanctuary. It represents a different kind of urbanism, one born not from the ambition to dominate a landscape, but from the primal need to disappear within it. The city's silent, dark corridors speak of a community's collective will to endure, carving their hope for survival directly into the bones of the planet. What does it mean for a civilization to leave its greatest architectural achievement not as a monument to the sky, but as a secret buried in the dark? A single word carved into a wooden post has haunted the American imagination for centuries: Croatoan. This was the only message left behind when a relief ship arrived at the small English settlement on Roanoke Island in 1590, finding the fort dismantled and the colony of over 100 men, women, and children utterly gone. No sign of struggle, no mass grave, just an eerie silence and that cryptic clue: the lost colony is not a city of stone, but a village of vanished people, a historical mystery where the artifact is an absence itself. Its rediscovery is not of bricks and mortar, but of context, a modern scientific effort to fill a blank page in the early story of English America with evidence from the earth and the environment. For generations, the fate of the colonists was the stuff of dark speculation and folklore. Modern archaeology, however, has shifted the search from a single dramatic answer to a more nuanced understanding of their world. Excavations on Roanoke Island and the surrounding area have uncovered tantalizing fragments of English life from the correct time period. A rapier hilt, pieces of pottery, a ring, mingled with Native American artifacts. This physical evidence suggests not a sudden, violent end, but interaction and exchange. The dominant theory among researchers today is not one of tragedy, but of assimilation. Facing extreme hardship, including a severe drought confirmed by tree ring studies of ancient bald cypress trees, the struggling colonists may have split into smaller groups. Some likely sought integration with nearby indigenous communities, such as the Croatan people, whose name matches the famous carving. This would have been a practical survival strategy, and later reports from English explorers mention individuals with European features or clothing among coastal tribes. The word Croatoan may not have been a distress signal, but a deliberate direction telling the governor where they had gone. The scientific rediscovery of Roanoke, therefore, transforms a ghost story into a human story. It uses soil chemistry to analyze past climate, ceramic analysis to trace trade, and careful excavation to find the quiet traces of coexistence. It demonstrates that some lost cities are not places at all, but communities of people who chose a different path, blending into a new landscape and leaving behind a puzzle not of death, but of transformation. The mystery endures not because there are no answers, but because the answer is likely one of resilience and cultural merging, a quiet integration that left no grand monument, only a whisper in the archaeological record and a single word carved in wood, pointing not toward oblivion but toward a new beginning. Beneath the serene surface of Europe's oldest lake, another world sleeps. Lake Ohrid, straddling the border of North Macedonia and Albania, holds more than just clear, deep water. It cradles the delicate remains of entire villages built not on solid ground, but on forests of wooden stilts. These are the pile-dwelling settlements, a network of prehistoric communities that thrived here from 6,000 to 500 years before the Common Era. Their rediscovery did not come from a dramatic excavation on land, but from the quiet, meticulous science of underwater archaeology, revealing that sometimes a city's most valuable secrets are preserved not in stone, but in saturated wood and silt. The lake itself became a perfect time capsule. When these ancient builders drove their timber posts into the soft lake bed, they created a unique environment. The cold, oxygen-poor water at the bottom of Lake Ohrid inhibits the bacteria that normally cause wood and other organic materials to rot. This waterlogged, anaerobic setting acts as a natural preservative, freezing everyday life in a state of remarkable detail. What emerges from the mud is not the grand architecture of kings, but the intimate blueprint of a community. Archaeologists mapping these submerged sites find the ghostly outlines of house floors, the precise grid of supporting piles, and even the remnants of wooden walkways that connected homes above the waterline. This preservation offers a window into Neolithic and Bronze Age domestic life with a clarity rarely found on dry land. Here, we find the actual tools of existence: wooden spoons, bowls carved from single blocks of timber, fishing nets woven from plant fibers, and fragments of woven cloth. We can see the food that sustained them: piles of seeds from cultivated grains, the bones of domesticated animals, and the remains of fish from the lake itself. This evidence paints a vivid picture of a mixed economy, where farming, animal husbandry, and fishing were seamlessly integrated, all centered around the protective embrace of the water. These stilt villages were a brilliant adaptation. Building over the lake provided natural defense from predators and rival groups, regulated temperature through the water's cooling effect, and offered direct access to a vital food source. The communities were likely tightly knit, their social structure built on cooperation for construction, maintenance, and daily survival. The discovery of these sites, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site shared by both nations, shifts our historical focus in a profound way. For a long time, the narrative of rediscovery was dominated by fallen empires and monumental architecture, the palaces, temples, and fortresses of the powerful. The pile dwellings of Lake Ohrid remind us that the heartbeat of history is found in the everyday. The value lies not in gold or grandiose inscriptions, but in understanding how ordinary people built their homes, fed their families, and passed their skills from one generation to the next across hundreds of years. This marshland maze, preserved in the cool, dark water, tells a story of resilience, adaptation, and the quiet, persistent work of community. It asks us to reconsider what we mean by a lost city, suggesting that the most profound connections to our past may come not from the throne room, but from the wooden floor of a simple house, standing silent on stilts over a timeless lake. The endless sea of grass on the Mongolian steppe holds a silence that speaks of great movement. For centuries, the precise location of the Mongol Empire's fabled heart was itself a matter of legend, debated by scholars who sifted through the accounts of travelers and the whispers of the wind. The search for Karakorum, the imperial capital of Genghis Khan's successors, was a quest to pin down the center of a world-spanning power that seemed to defy the very idea of a fixed capital. The breakthrough came not from a single dramatic find, but from a meticulous marriage of text and trowel. Archaeologists, guided by the detailed 13th-century report of a Franciscan friar named William of Rubruck, who had visited the court of the Great Khan, systematically surveyed the area near the later Buddhist monastery of Erdene. Their work revealed the unmistakable footprint of a major settlement. Here, in a valley of the Orkhon River, they found the remains of the city founded by Urgide Khan, son of Genghis, in 1235. This was no seasonal camp. Karakoram was a deliberate creation, a cosmopolitan nerve center designed to administer an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna. The archaeological evidence paints a picture of stunning diversity. Excavations uncovered the foundations of a bustling urban center with distinct quarters. There were Buddhist temples, a Nestorian Christian church, and a mosque, all standing within the same city walls. Chinese and Persian ceramics, Tibetan ritual objects, and European glass have all been recovered from the site, testifying to the constant flow of people, goods, and ideas along the secure trade routes of the Pax Mongolica. At the city's heart stood the palace of the Great Khan, described by Rubruck as having a great silver fountain crafted in the shape of a tree, from which pipes dispensed drinks for the court. This image of a technological marvel in the middle of the steppe shatters the simplistic stereotype. The rediscovery of Karakoram forces a profound historical correction. It challenges the enduring image of the Mongols as purely nomadic destroyers, a force of chaos that swept in from the wilderness only to burn and retreat. The city's very existence reveals them as pragmatic empire builders who understood that to rule the world, they needed a place to gather its wealth, administer its laws, and showcase its splendor. Karakoram was that place, a physical symbol of unity and control, where scribes kept records in multiple scripts, diplomats from across Eurasia negotiated, and artisans from conquered territories practiced their crafts. It was the administrative engine of a state that valued commerce, communication, and centralized governance as much as military conquest. The city's decline was tied to the empire's fragmentation and the later decision by Kublai Khan to move the capital to what is now Beijing. Yet its silent foundations on the open plain ask us to reconsider the nature of power. Can a people defined by mobility also be the architects of a fixed global capital? The stones of Karakoram answer with a quiet yes, reminding us that the greatest empires are often built not by rejecting contradiction, but by mastering it, creating a world where the steppe and the city, the tent and the palace, could exist as two sides of the same mighty coin. The legends of India speak of a city that shone like a jewel, only to be reclaimed by the sea. In the ancient epic of the Mahabharata, the magnificent city of Dwarka was the divine kingdom of Lord Krishna, a place of splendor and power said to have vanished beneath the waves upon his passing. For millennia, this was a powerful spiritual story, a mythic memory of a golden age lost to the ocean. But what if that memory held a grain of geological truth? The quest for that answer has unfolded not in libraries, but in the murky, sediment-filled waters off the coast of modern Gujarat, where mythology and sonar technology have begun a fascinating conversation. Marine archaeologists from India's National Institute of Oceanography have conducted extensive underwater surveys in the Gulf of Combat. Using side-scan sonar and sub-bottom profilers, they have mapped the seafloor, revealing something startling. The scans show large, geometric stone structures lying in depths of up to 120 feet. These are not random rocks. The sonar images suggest the outlines of what appear to be walls, pillars, and rectangular foundations spread across a significant area. The most compelling material evidence comes from dredged samples. From these submerged structures, archaeologists have recovered artifacts including pottery shards, stone tools, and what are described as weathered wooden beams. When subjected to carbon dating, some of these materials have yielded dates ranging from 7,500 to 3,200 years before the present. This time frame is extraordinarily broad, but the older end reaches back to a period contemporaneous with the Great Harappan or Indus Valley civilization. This scientific discovery invites a thrilling yet cautious interpretation. One leading hypothesis suggests that these underwater remains could be those of a major Harappan-era port settlement. The Indus Valley civilization was known for its far-flung trade, and a coastal city in this location would have been a logical hub for maritime commerce. Geological studies indicate that this region has experienced significant land subsidence and rising sea levels over the millennia. A prosperous port city built on a sinking coast could have gradually been inundated, its abandonment etched into cultural memory over generations. The story of a great city lost to the sea could have been passed down, eventually becoming woven into the grand theological narratives of later cultures, transforming a historical event into a divine legend. It is crucial, however, to navigate these waters with academic care. The site is exceptionally challenging to excavate due to strong currents and low visibility, making definitive conclusions difficult. Some scholars urge caution, noting that natural geological formations can sometimes mimic human structures, and that the broad range of dates requires more precise contextual analysis. The investigation of Dwarka, therefore, stands at a brilliant intersection. It demonstrates how modern science can probe the roots of deep cultural stories, not to simply prove a myth true or false, but to understand how such powerful legends are born. The work suggests that folklore can be a kind of historical echo, a poetic encoding of real events. A coastal communities struggle with a changing shoreline, the loss of a home to the relentless ocean. Each piece of pottery raised from the silt is a potential bridge between a spiritual parable and a tangible past, reminding us that the line between sacred story and sunken city may be thinner than we ever imagined. The Roman ideal of order found its purest expression not in the capital, but on a distant frontier. In the rugged Ouros Mountains of Algeria, a city sleeps beneath the sand, its streets laid out with a geometric precision so perfect it feels like a diagram brought to life. This is Timgad, known to the Romans as Thamugadi, a colonial town founded by the Emperor Trajan around the year 100. It was not a settlement that grew organically from a village or a crossroads. Timgad was a deliberate act of civilization, a perfect square of urban planning stamped onto the North African landscape to house retired legionaries and project Roman power. Lost after the Arab conquests of the 7th century, it lay forgotten until 1881, when a team of French explorers brushed back the dunes to reveal a Roman city frozen in time. Its grid is a masterclass in imperial logic. Two main roads, the Cardo and Decumanus, intersect at the city center, dividing the space into impeccably measured blocks called insulae. Every citizen knew their place, literally. The uniformity of the housing plot speaks of a society built on equality among its veteran colonists, a reward for service rendered to the empire. Yet within this rigid framework, the flourishes of Roman culture thrived. The city boasted a magnificent library, one of the few from the Roman world whose structure we can clearly understand, its niches for scrolls still evident in the stone. A well-preserved theater capable of seating thousands provided entertainment and a vital sense of shared identity. And at the western entrance, a towering triumphal arch dedicated to Trajan still stands, a monumental gateway that framed a soldier's return not to war, but to a peaceful, ordered retirement. This was the true genius of Romanization. Timgad was more than a military outpost. It was a living advertisement for the Roman way of life. It exported the entire package of urban comfort and civic virtue to the edge of the empire: baths for cleanliness, forums for commerce and politics, temples for worship, and theaters for leisure. A retired legionary could walk its colonnaded streets, hear a play in Latin, and browse philosophical texts, all while standing guard over a newly pacified province. His very presence in his comfortable, familiar city was the empire's most persuasive argument for stability and belonging. The sand that buried Timgad, drifting in after its final abandonment, became its greatest protector. It gently filled the streets and houses, shielding the stonework from later stone robbers and preserving the city's skeleton in astonishing detail. Unlike Rome itself, which was continuously built over, or coastal cities lost to rising seas, Timgad offers a pristine, almost clinical snapshot of mid-level Roman urban life. We see not the grandiose imperial capital, but the provincial blueprint, the template for hundreds of towns that spread Roman culture across 3 continents. Its silent, sun-bleached grid asks a profound question about the nature of empire. Can you build a perfect city? At Timgad, for a few centuries, they believed they had. It stands as a testament to the power of an idea, that order, law, and a shared civic blueprint could be carried to the farthest corners of the known world, creating a little piece of Rome wherever the legions planted their standards. The perfect grid of Timgad was a map of human ambition, but the greatest maps are sometimes the ones we cannot see. For over a century, the dense rainforests of northern Guatemala were considered the final word on the Maya world. Archaeologists knew major ceremonial centers like Tikal were there, but the jungle was so thick, so impenetrable, that surveying it on foot was a task of generations. The assumption was that these grand plazas and pyramids were isolated jewels in a green sea, separated by vast tracts of untouched wilderness. That entire understanding has been erased in a single technological stroke. The 30th and final rediscovery on our journey is not of a single city, but of an entire civilization unveiled, made possible by a revolution in how we see. The tool is LiDAR, light detection and ranging. Imagine a plane flying over that endless canopy, firing millions of laser pulses toward the ground every second. Most hit the leaves and branches, but a fraction slip through tiny gaps, strike the earth, and bounce back. By calculating the time each pulse takes to return, a computer can strip away the vegetation digitally, revealing a pristine, 3-dimensional map of the ground beneath. It is like draining a green ocean to see the sunken continent below. What these LiDAR surveys have revealed across the Guatemalan lowlands is nothing short of a historical earthquake. Where we once saw empty jungle between known sites, we now see a continuous, engineered landscape. The data has exposed over 60,000 previously unknown structures, not just a few more temples, but a sprawling network of elevated roadways, complex irrigation canals, terracing for intensive agriculture, defensive walls, and countless house platforms. This was not a civilization of scattered city-states. It was a vast, interconnected, and densely populated society, a low-density urban sprawl that integrated everything from royal palaces to small farmsteads into a single, managed system. This new map is rewriting the Maya story in real time. Previous population estimates based on what was visible from the ground have been shattered. Researchers now believe the Maya lowlands could have supported 10 to 15 million people at their peak around the 8th century, a scale comparable to advanced societies in Europe and Asia at the same time. Their agricultural sophistication was breathtaking. The LiDAR maps show extensive wetland fields and canals, suggesting they practiced forms of swamp agriculture that could produce multiple harvests a year, sustaining the immense populations the scans now imply. The sheer density of fortifications and earthworks also tells a story of a society under significant pressure, likely from both internal conflict and environmental strain, adding new depth to our understanding of their later transformations. This is the ultimate modern rediscovery because it points unequivocally to the future. The Guatemalan survey covered only a fraction of the known Maya world. What lies beneath the jungles of Belize, Mexico, and Honduras? And beyond the Maya, what lost worlds are hidden under the rainforests of the Amazon, the Congo, or the islands of Southeast Asia, waiting for the laser's eye? LiDAR has handed us a new lens, and with it, a profound humility. We have been walking over lost cities for centuries, literally unable to see the foundations beneath our feet. The story of rediscovery no longer belongs solely to the determined explorer with a machete, but also to the technician, the data scientist, and the algorithm. It suggests that the greatest chapters of our shared human past are not necessarily lost, just currently invisible, waiting for the next leap in vision to pull them back into the light. Our journey through 30 lost cities ends not with a conclusion but with an opening, a glimpse of an endless frontier of discovery, where the next great city is not a legend in a text, but a digital ghost in the data, patiently awaiting its return to our collective memory. The story of our past is not written in stone alone, but in the very questions we learn to ask, from the sunken villages of Lake Ohrid to the laser-revealed metropolises of the Maya. This journey across 30 rediscovered cities has woven a profound tapestry of human experience. We have witnessed ambition carved into cliff faces and resilience etched into subterranean stone. We have seen societies flourish through ingenious adaptation, only to fade when the balance of environment, economy, or connection was lost. Each excavation, whether by satellite or shovel, is a conversation with silence, a patient effort to listen to the echoes left behind in empty plazas and buried foundations. These lost cities are far more than archaeological trophies. They are cautionary tales, sources of inspiration, and mirrors reflecting our own fragile moment in time. They teach us about the profound impacts of a changing climate, the complex webs of cultural exchange, and the unbreakable human spirit that drives us to create meaning and community, regardless of the odds. The most vital lesson may be this: history is not a closed book on a shelf, but an active, ongoing excavation. Our world, for all its satellites and maps, still holds breathtaking secrets. They wait in plain sight under forest canopies, beneath tranquil waters, and within the dusty soil of forgotten tales, patient for the next curious mind, equipped with either a humble trowel or a revolutionary laser. If this exploration of lost worlds has sparked your curiosity, consider joining our community for more journeys into history's greatest enigmas. Share in the comments below which rediscovered city captured your imagination the most. Was it the hydraulic genius of Angkor, the silent plea of Pompeii, or the submerged mystery of Dwarka? Your perspective adds another layer to the story. Let's keep the conversation and the endless discovery alive.